Hey, welcome to People Think About It. This is the show that will make you laugh, cry, and sometimes even smile. We want to welcome our guest today, and we're going to get Dorshell to read a little bit and introduce our guest.
So today our guest this evening, is Judge Regina Matthews. Judge Regina is a native of Chicago, Illinois, where she graduated with honors through the Chicago public school system. She left Chicago to attend the University of South Carolina in Columbia, South Carolina, where she completed her collegiate studies with high honors. Judge Matthews studied at USC. She relocated to Georgia in 2001 and earned her Juris Doctorate degree from Emory Law School in 2004. During her tenure at Emory, she received several scholarships to include the Emory Public Law Initiative Grant and the Georgia Association of Black Women Attorneys Scholarship. Following her servant's heart, upon graduation from Emory Law School, Judge Matthews was offered and accepted employment as an assistant public defender at the Office of Public Defender, DeKalb County, Georgia. In her first year of representing clients in court, Judge Matthews won 12 of her first 15 trials. Judge Matthews later started her own law practice, specializing in criminal law, family law, and juvenile law. While in public practice, she earned certification for alternative dispute resolution, which allowed her to mediate civil cases in the state of Georgia. In the capacity, Judge Matthews became an approved mediator for civil cases in Gwinnett County courts. Throughout her career, she tried cases in Superior Court, State Court, Juvenile Court, Municipal, and Recorder's Court in courtrooms all across the state of Georgia. She also served as a senior staff attorney in Gwinnett County Superior Court and as a law clerk with the United States District Court, Northern District of Georgia. In 2020, Judge Matthews was appointed by all 11 Gwinnett County Superior Court judges and the Chief Magistrate Judge of Gwinnett County to serve as a full-time magistrate judge, where Judge Matthews currently serves. In this role, Judge Matthews sits by designation primarily for Superior Court, but also handle cases in State Court, Recorder's Court, Juvenile Court, and Probate Court, proceeding over a vast array of cases including family law, felony, and misdemeanor criminal cases, and general civil litigation. She's also married with two sons.
Lovely sons. Judge Regina Matthews, we want to welcome you to People Think About It. And we're going to talk about the court system, child support, and maybe some of you listeners out there, some of your questions maybe get asked. So we're going to switch the mic over to Miss Regina, and let's get a few words from you, Miss Regina.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I know this topic is one that a lot of people have questions about. So I think sometimes there's some ambiguity about court processes, and I'm always excited to share with people the knowledge and information that they need in case that they face going through court litigation for whatever reason. So I'm happy to be here.
Okay, and we thank you for being our guest today. So we're going to open up the floor, and we're going to ask a few questions and let you hopefully give us some answers to the questions. The first question I want to put out there on the floor, when you're litigating and going through the child support situation, what percentage of men versus women do you think get caught in that system?
I don't have an exact figure. As far as individuals who are obligated by the courts to pay child support by way of some sort of case that's brought, I would say it's probably, if I had to guess, 65% fathers, 35% mothers who have a child support obligation they have to pay to the other parent. I'm just throwing that number out there based on what I see. But, under the law of Georgia, both parents have to financially support their children. And if you don't, not only, will you go to court and face having the court determine what child support should be, but you could also face criminal charges for failure to support your child. But I certainly see both men and women, mothers and fathers in court.
I guess why do you think that there's a large percentage of men that have to pay into the system, whether they're taking care of their children or not? Why do you think there's a larger percentage of men that's in the system to have to pay? Because one of the things that you did say that I found out that in different states the child support law can vary, can be different.
True.
When I came here to Georgia, I had a child support case which was in Maryland.
Right.
But Maryland, I guess did some kind of litigation or whatever. In Georgia, they told Georgia to start garnishing my wages, and then Georgia would send the money to Maryland, but that became confusing too.
Right.
And I tell everybody that's in that system, the best thing to do is hold on to your receipts, because when I was going through it, I was holding to my receipts. So Maryland said they was never receiving the funds, which I showed, hey, well, here's the garnishment. Now, that's on you. But why do you think that there's more men that get in the position where they have to pay rather than in no matter what state it is or whatever? Why do you think it's more men into the system?
I think it depends on a lot of different factors, but one I will say is statistically there are more mothers who are the head of the household raising children, I guess, outside of the relationship that the child was conceived in, I guess is the best way to say it. So, I think that's just how it falls, right? Moms are raising these children, fathers out of the home. Whoever the primary custodial parent is the parent who has the right to receive child support. And just by numbers, the way it works out, usually there are more mothers raising children as a primary physical custodian. But I do see cases on the other side, too, where fathers have custody of children, and so then the mother has to pay. So I think that's probably a large part of it.
Right.
The other part is, sometimes if fathers have custody of children, they don't want, maybe men, I don't know, are more likely to not want to get the courts involved. That could be part of it, too.
Right. And it is like, when you talk about joint custody, somebody still has to pay even in a joint custody situation? Not
necessarily. So in Georgia, so I'll just say based on the experience that I have in the cases that I've handled, a lot of times if the parents, if their incomes are similar, and they don't have to be exact, but if they make around the same amount of money and they're sharing custody, like 50-50 arrangement, there are ways in which the judge can deviate from whatever the child support amount typically would be, such that neither parent will pay child support to the other. That's not always the case.
Right.
So in some cases where one parent, let's say, makes a lot more than the other parent, and let's say the children were raised together in a household where both parents were contributing, the general consensus is you don't want to take a child just because the relationship or the marriage didn't work and have them living a standard of living that is very, very different than what they were accustomed to. So in some cases, if one parent, again, does have a lot more resources, you can still pay child support, even though there is a 50-50 custodial arrangement, just based on what the needs of the child are.
So what about those situations where you have, let's say, a man that's financially sound, and he says, well, you know what, give me custody of the child, and she don't have to pay me anything. Like sometimes I think there's an imbalance there, because if it's about finance and I can provide financially, and I can show you on paper where I can provide financially, how does that get determined, being that it's about, like you say, having it so the child lifestyle doesn't change dramatically?
So what I will say is that there is a statute in Georgia that deals with how courts are supposed to determine child support. So there's really a formula, and you go by the formula, but judges can deviate, right? So basically, when establishing child support in Georgia, there's an electronic worksheet that gets filled out, and you put in both parties' incomes. Sometimes you might put in if one parent's paying for medical expenses for the child. That'll all go into the worksheet. And then the worksheet basically spits out a number as to what child support should be. That's the presumptive amount. However, judges have the discretion to deviate from that amount if they think it's appropriate. So in the scenario that you just mentioned, a father or mother, whoever, can express to the court, I'd ask that you deviate, to zero if that's what what you want, and the judge can make a decision again whether or not they believe the person making the income that they make can sufficiently support the child, whether the other party agrees with that arrangement. At the end of the day, we just want to make sure the children are going to be provided for.
Right. And then when you look at it and to a lot of, like, I cut hair, so I talk to a lot of guys that are in somewhat that situation, and their thing is, I can provide financially. Mm-hmm. And I've had to explain them visitation and child support, two separate things.
I just had to say that in court yesterday.
And a lot of them don't get it because we as men, we sit back and say, well, if I'm paying, nobody should dictate when I can see my child.
Right.
Because we all related to a financial situation, because you're saying child support is about financially taking care of the child.
Right.
Then you have some of those situations where, let's just hypothetically say, whether it's the man or the woman that's getting the child support, and they're taking the child support and going to do whatever they want to do, whether it's buy a car, whether it's party or whatever, and the child is still not getting taken care of. So I just often wonder, do the court system ever look at that situation?
So it's hard when determining child support on the first, in the first instance, what's going to happen once this child support gets ordered, right? We cannot control what people do with the money once they get it. We just look at the facts as they are before us, right, and determining, okay, this is what this person makes, this is what this person makes, these are the needs of the child, so this is what child support will be. I also hear the same arguments all the time about people who get frustrated because, they see, whoever the person is receiving support, they're living, lavishly, spending money on, going to the beauty shop or the nails, and the children are just not, right, receiving it directly. But what I tell people is, you can't control how they spend that child support. I can't control it. Children, I would hope, still have to live in a household, right? You still have to pay for food. They have to be, they have to have a roof over their head, water. So all the things you don't maybe tangibly see every day, that still goes into the household that's benefiting the child. So even though there may not be a direct, like, I'm going to take the money and spend it only on the child, they're still benefiting from those additional resources. In the best case scenario, if things are occurring the way they should. Now, certainly if there are instances where the child is completely being neglected, then that's a different kind of court case you need to bring to the court's attention.
So do you feel like, in seeing the cases, some of the cases you have seen and dealt with, and when you're talking about finance, a lot of people get upset about that.
Of course.
And like we just said about a child not being, or that parent feel like I'm paying, but that child is not being taken care of properly.
Right.
Do you think it should be some kind of system designed to where that money is allocated and that it's going to provide for that child?
There's really no way of doing that. I can't.
Like an EBT card, you go spend it. An EBT card, you only can buy certain things with an EBT card. So,
and I don't know that is something that the court should be involved in. And I think, first of all, it would be really hard to pinpoint where every dollar of child support gets spent. Nor do I think it's really something that we need to do. Because, again, there are day-to-day expenses that occur just by when someone pays rent or pays their mortgage, right? That's not necessarily going directly to the child, but it is benefiting the child. Right. Same thing with utilities. But if money is coming from different sources, right? So you have the child support coming in, and you may have that parent's income coming in. They're all going into one checking account. How do you really pinpoint the dollars for child support versus what I'm getting from my income? I just think it shouldn't be that way. As long as the child is being cared for and the child is not being neglected, that's something different. If they are, then again, another kind of court case needs to be brought. But you can't get upset because you see someone living well, even though you're contributing. I mean, your child is benefiting, whether you see it, I guess, or not, if that makes sense.
Okay, so I have 2 questions. The first question is, what is best? Like in my situation, I just paid my child support through my bank account, but a lot of people get put in the system to pay which do you think is the best way of getting the support? Through that way, or do you have to go through the actual government to have them send the check? I mean, which do you think is the best way? Because the way I did it, I just went through my bank account and just transferred it over.
I think it depends. There are some people that insist on it going through the child support registry, which is maintained by the state. Those cases usually are because those parents have had difficulty collecting child support in other ways. So if it's garnished, in other words, directly from someone's paycheck and it goes through the state registry, that guarantees that you get it, right? And so for people who have a history of not paying or getting behind or, those situations, then the court usually will intervene and say, okay, we're going to directly garnish it, and it'll come through us. But a lot of times people just agree to pay, have it come out of my account or send a check or send a money order. I see it both ways, and in most cases, people are able to get their child support paid however the parties agree to exchange the funds. But people who have a history of not paying, more than likely, they're going to be garnished.
So you said earlier in your conversation that child support can turn to a criminal charge.
Yes.
Because if you're not paying,
yes,
you can make it criminal. And I said that because there's some people that get garnishment and they will stop working so they can't get garnishment anymore.
This is true. And so there are a lot of consequences that can come from not paying child support. And when I talked about criminal charges earlier, there's a misdemeanor offense in the state of Georgia called abandonment. So this is whether or not, and a lot of people don't realize this, whether you have a court order for child support or not, someone can take out a warrant. Your child's father or mother, whoever the other parent is, can take out a warrant and say, I'm not receiving any support from this person. I want to take out a warrant. And that's even before, or like I said, that's even whether or not you have a court order for child support or not. So let's say 2 people have a child, they break up, one parent is taking care of the child. Neither one has gone to court for child support, but the other parent is just gone. You never hear from them again. And the other parent's like, well, wait a minute.
So if they get stopped by the police or something, they get picked up on a warrant. They
could. So that parent can go and say, there is no child support order, but, in Georgia, you're obligated to support your child in some way, whether or not you have a court order or not. And so the parent can go apply for a warrant, and if you get stopped, you could be arrested for not taking care of your child. But the part you're talking about is some other. So if you get garnished, and I have had cases where people stop working so that their checks aren't garnished to avoid paying child support. Trust me, they can get it other ways. They can levy your taxes for child support. They can take away your passport. They can take away your driver's license. So there are a lot of I call them collateral consequences that you may not be aware of if you don't pay your child support.
Well, so let's flip the script here for a minute, because, like I said, you deal with 2 different divisions in child support and visitation.
Yes.
A lot of men, I would say more than women, go through the point where the mother has custody of the children, but some of them don't abide by the visitation.
Right.
And a lot of guys, especially guys I talk to, they find it hard to go to the system they have to go to get their visitation, because it seems like it doesn't work as easy as if you're saying they're not paying. How do you think that these people should deal with that?
And I know that's a frustration that I hear a lot about in court as well. But you said it earlier, and it's very true that custody and visitation is completely separate from child support. Whether or not you are granted access to visitation or not, you have to pay. And I know it's frustrating, and the law is what it is, but 2 separate things. Even if the parent is preventing you from having any contact with your child whatsoever, you still have to support the child.
Are they in violation of the law, though?
The parent?
If that parent, if you're in the court with that parent and that judge says, okay, the initial charge, you're going to pay this every month. You get to see that child Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and every other weekend. And that, let's say, whatever couple is going through that, and they don't abide by that Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and every other weekend, can they be held for criminal charges?
Well, yes. So that is a violation of the court order, and that is called contempt. So when you don't follow a court order, yes, you would file something with a court saying this person isn't following the visitation schedule like you ordered, and you can ask for that person to be thrown in jail, to pay a fine. In some cases, the parent having custody can lose custody for keeping the child away from the other parent. I've seen that happen in cases where a parent is just going to do what they want to do regardless of what the court order says. And guess what? If you do that, you're subjecting yourself to having the children taken away from you. But either way it goes, I mean, if there's a court order for child support and you disregard it, you're also contemptuous. So you can be held in jail.
Right.
And I've seen a lot of cases. I've handled cases where people get thrown in jail and they don't get out until you pay.
So how do they pay if they're in jail?
They figure out a way. It is alarming to me how many times I've had to incarcerate someone because they haven't paid, and immediately within days they come up with the money. Somehow they call a relative, a friend, or whatever. They find the money because they don't want to be in jail. But for people who really do, because people have hard times, obviously, sometimes you just can't pay it.
Right.
Judges are not supposed to hold people in contempt of court if there really is a true inability for this person to pay. We don't want to see people, they used to have debtors' prisons. We don't do that anymore. So we can't just hold people in jail because they're poor and they can't pay it. Right. If you can show that you have made all the efforts you can and you still just can't pay, then a judge is not going to throw you in jail. And at some point you'll need to file some paperwork basically to get a reduction. To get a reduction. But you're going to have to show that you've made efforts and you've made some steps towards paying something. Right. You can't just come and say, well, I can't afford child support, and so I haven't paid anything, right, in 5 years. But you got to pay something, right. Because if you're living and eating and, your child should be too. It's the thought.
So let's go back to that Monday and Wednesday and Friday and every other weekend situation. So that parent is not letting you see your child on these visitation rights that you've been granted in court. Okay. So let's say you see that child somewhere with that other parent and you take that child. Is that considered kidnapping? When you have paperwork saying I'm supposed to have this child Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and you literally take that child from that parent on that particular day, is that still considered kidnapping?
It's not. If the court order is clear that these are your designated days and this is when you're supposed to have the child, then you're not in violation of any kind of law. I usually don't encourage people. It's sort of like taking the law in your own hand because it can turn really ugly. And I've seen those cases where you're trying to, exercise your custodial rights, and you don't want the child to get caught in a tug of war. You don't want to start a physical altercation. And sometimes it ends up being that. But you just need to always tell people to do the right thing. And I know courts can be intimidating. I know sometimes it's convoluted. What do I file? Where do I file it? But the best thing to do is to, file an action for contempt with the court and let the courts handle it. I would not advise someone to just go and show up at someone's house and try to snatch a child. It's not criminal if it's your right,
if it's your day.
If it's your day, but it could just turn so ugly quickly.
Yeah, because I was telling one client that they were going through that, and I said, that those days have to be very specific.
Right.
You can't say true. Every other weekend. You got to say every second weekend, every third weekend.
Exactly
or whatever.
Right.
Because if you say every other weekend and you call the police, I don't know.
They don't know which weekend it is.
Weekend, so guess what? You can't take that child.
That's very good advice.
If you have paperwork and said, well, I get this child a second and the fourth weekend, and it's the second and fourth weekend, you can't sit there and debate.
Right.
I was telling him, I know one time before I had a situation when my children were young, And I had court papers saying I was supposed. That's how I found out it has to be very specific, whether it's the second or third or fourth weekend.
Right.
But I had the court papers. I called the police officer. I said, y'all need to get this child for me, right? Because I have visitation. But when we got there, it didn't say, the second weekend, third weekend. So they were like, nothing we can do.
Yeah, and a lot of times the police officers, I mean, they will say, we're going to kind of take a hands-off approach. This is a civil matter, is what I'm told. A lot of litigants get told by the police is this is a civil matter. We're not going to get involved with that. You just need to file something with the court. If it's more clear, I think some officers will intervene. And if it's clear in that order that this is the second weekend and it's from 6 p.m. to whatever, and, it's spelled out very clearly, then the officers can say, you need to turn over this child. Otherwise, you're interfering with custody, and that's a criminal offense, too, interfering with custody. So if someone has a designated specific time and you're interfering with that, then you could be prosecuted.
So could you be arrested on the spot?
You could be. I don't see that happen, but you could be. Like I said, most of the times police law enforcement doesn't want to be involved with that. So they just tell people this is a civil dispute. This is not really a crime, even though, again, in some cases it can be.
Right.
So I would like to interject. I have a personal question and a legal question. I'm going to tax you on that, on those highfalutin legal degrees you got. One is I was awarded custody of my children, and I use that word loosely, awarded, because these are biologically my children. I had to prove that they were mine through had to go to prove paternity.
Okay.
But then also, secondly, had to be awarded, had to establish paternity in order to
get legitimated,
for them to be legitimized. And I understand it because we are in a probate state. This is Georgia, and as a financial professional, I understand that through the inheritance laws and what you can receive. But on the personal level, if my child support case has been closed permanently. But I still owe the arrears. So when I spoke to one of your contemporaries, I said, when it was concluded, I'm trying to get my passport back. So if I have custody of the children and I try to get the arrears wiped out, what is it where if I have the children permanently and I'm not a flight risk, how come I can't get my passport back? Or no, let me rephrase that. Can I get my passport back? I'm not asking. I'm telling. Because it's different. It's different now. These are my children. I have custody of them. How come,
I understand. And so there are a lot of cases where, originally you may not have custody, but then you get custody, right? And so obviously, like you said, child support is terminated. But if you were ever behind, you have to pay those arrears whether or not you have custody or not, because the arrears covers what should have been paid in the past. Yeah. So even if you currently have your children, if there is an obligation that you got behind on, you still owe it. No matter what. But
federal law says you cannot restrict my travel in and out of the country for religious, business, family. What if I was from Ethiopia or from Indonesia and I had a parent there that was ailing? They take prisoners out of jail to go visit their family when they're ailing in hospitals or at their funerals. So how come I can't get mine? Because one is, how is it that the family court on a local and a federal level that is attached to the Treasury Department, which issues out the passports to the State Department, right? The way that the Social Security Act was enacted was to receive that, so you can get the money through my income tax returns. Secondly, if you say that I'm in default of arrears, I have custody of the children. So how am I flight risk? I have my children. I can take my children with me and never pay the arrears. I mean, what is the loophole? I'm not saying where is the loophole. That is the loophole retroactively, going that way against me instead of that way.
No, I understand. I think, honestly, that's more of a question probably for a legislator, someone who actually makes these laws that have you in your predicament, because all I can do is enforce
what the law the answer. The answer is, right, with the balance of powers. One, the legislative part on the federal and the local level, one cannot outweigh the other. It is called a balance of power. The legislative side cannot outweigh over the judicial side. What you say cannot go over there. What laws do they pass?
Right.
So if you said what law is in effect in Georgia right now? Abortion is illegal. So if she says that baby is his, Your Honor, and I said, like Mark Lawrence movie, I ain't the pappy of that baby. But if she says that I'm gonna file a charge of abandonment, and then you say, listen, I got a window there, I'm gonna challenge paternity. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't challenge paternity. I would file a countersuit and say, well, Your Honor, she had a baby, right? And she had an abortion before that. So how you know that's my baby? She committed a criminal act. And then when she had the baby the second time, she said the second baby is his.
Okay, you lost me on that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So let me wait a minute, hold on,
You
Mustafa.
get lost in this quagmire.
Let me put it this way.
That ain't my baby.
Wait a minute, let's put it this way. Can the court systems force you to take a DNA to see if that's your child?
Yes.
So
that's illegal.
So if a young lady comes to the court system and says that's your child, and you say you're in denial, said that ain't my child, I ain't been with this woman.
Right.
So a judge can say you have to take a DNA, and if you don't take that DNA, what can happen to you if you refuse to take that DNA?
I have never had a case where someone has a father who has denied taking a DNA test. Because if you really believe that you're not the father of that child, then take the DNA test. But all that aside, yes, a court can order a DNA test to be performed. Again, if you violate a court order, that's contempt. So yes, you can be held in jail. You can be fined. So yes, there are consequences if you don't do it. Well, if it's a court order and you don't follow it.
No, I'm amazed at that.
So the DNA, a judge requesting for you to take a DNA becomes a court order.
Correct.
Right. So if you violate that court order, you're in violation of the law.
Correct.
No. It's because there's a difference in America between what is legal and what is lawful. Because what happened in my case, on the personal side, she challenged paternity. I pushed the order in order to obtain legitimacy. So in order to get custody, I had to legitimize the children.
You did, yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. So I'm already paying child support. So if you're saying there's an order and these are my children, and then you're challenging legitimization by saying you said that I am the father of the children. Now when I'm trying to get custody of the children, you want to challenge paternity. I had to go pay in order to get the paternity. So you're saying you've never seen where a father denied paternity of these children.
Well, not that, but denied and then said, I'm not going to take a test to show that I'm not.
But have you ever seen where I'm paying, not me, let me remove the I and the me. Have you ever seen where someone is trying to they're trying to obtain custody and to legitimize the children in the state of Georgia so they can inherit from them, so they can receive health care and child care.
And have legal rights.
So they can get an education. Mm-hmm. And then when they go to do that, they're challenging legitimation.
Yes.
And forcing the other parent to take a paternity test. So you're the mother. I've never seen where the mother challenged paternity. How you challenge paternity?
Because she might not think it's your kids.
No, because they tried. Here's the subterfuge. Have you seen this? Where someone tries to basically circumvent the custody by there was some other factors going on, but they wanted to establish only temporary custody so they could get the children back. So the way that the court had looked in, I had to come in with additional papers and say, Your Honor, this person is going to be incarcerated for a very, very long time. I mean, by the time they get out, the kids are going to be well into college. Now, whether me paying for college or custody or arrears or anything like that, as far as the children being with their lawful parent, their biological parent who is agreeing to take care of them, what was all that about? So now it makes sense, Your Honor, that I'm coming in with the paperwork, I'm coming in with the paternity results, and this person is challenging this. Well, all because they want temporary custody because they're about to be incarcerated.
Well, what I will tell you is that there's a difference between establishing paternity and establishing legal rights to your child. So when you have a child and you're not married, right? Only by law in Georgia, only the mother has legal rights to that child. So you have no rights whatsoever as an unmarried father, unless you do what you talk about and you file an action for legitimation. So here's the thing. You can be paternally, biologically, that child's parent. That has nothing to do with what rights you have as a father, unless you take the steps that you talk about and go and file that legitimation case. A lot of people don't know that.
Wow, that's
unmarried couples, just keep in mind, you're unmarried, you have a baby, only that mother has legal rights to that child. Now, biologically, if it's established that the child is yours, you will still have to pay child support, whether or not you legalize your rights to the child or not. But in order to get custody and visitation and that kind of thing, you have to file that legitimation case. Now, sometimes the mothers will acknowledge, well, yes, that's his biological father, but I don't want him to have legal rights. I don't want him to be legitimated.
Wow. So
people's reasons for that, I don't know. Usually it doesn't go well in court.
Right. So she can refuse. I want that joker to take no DNA.
Well, she can say that, but ultimately it's going to be up to the judge.
So let me ask you this question. And this is a kind of a case that I read about and one that I know about where someone went through the system and got put in child support, had to pay thousands and thousands of dollars. Then when the kid hit 18, they found out it wasn't his kid. So, and then another case was this young man was paying child support, and somewhere down the line, these kids were probably 5, 6 years old. He started questioning and went and had the DNA and found out they weren't his kids, but he still had to pay child support. Why is that?
So I think, and I'll start with the latter case. What may have happened, I don't know all of the facts, but in Georgia, there used to be a way where when a child is born, you can acknowledge paternity and you can acknowledge legitimation. Or you can basically sign at the time of birth to legitimate the child. You do that right there at the hospital. You sign a paper as a father. If you do that, if you acknowledge paternity and if you sign that document, right, establishing, yes, I'm his biological father, yes, I want to legitimate at this time, then you can't go back on that.
Wow.
So Georgia did away with that, with at least the legitimation part. You can't now at the hospital sign off and legitimate a child. Now you can still acknowledge paternity right there at the hospital, and if you do that and you're named on the birth certificate and you later have a DNA test and find out the child is not yours, guess what?
What? You still got to pay.
You still have to pay because you, at the time the child was born, this is what
you put your name on that birth certificate.
Exactly. So that's, I think, the later cases, the latter case that you referred to. Probably that's what happened. I don't know. But in other situations, I think you mentioned someone finding out just much later on, kind of what happens if they find out. That's why it's so important to have these paternity tests, right? So when you go to court, you have a right to ask for that. And I would, because you don't want to be in a position 20 years later where you then find the child is not yours.
So they need to come back up with some reimbursement.
That doesn't ever happen. Let me tell you. I've never seen somebody have to reimburse somebody.
Like, I done gave you all this money. You need to reimburse me because these jokers ain't mine.
But that's why I don't understand why people don't just say, well, let's get a paternity test. Because I wouldn't want to pay, for a child that's not mine unless I know what I'm getting into in the beginning, right? If I know, and there are people who do that, who take responsibility for other people's children. But if you don't want to be in that predicament, the easy thing to do is at the very beginning, take the paternity test.
Is there any kind of way that you can do a hardship? Let's say, for instance, the person who's paying child support gets sick, and they can't pay child support that month.
Right.
Can they figure out a way not to have to pay that month, or?
Yeah, it's called rears.
So you got, not necessarily. Well,
we'll get you next month.
I would just say immediately go and file for a modification. And so there are two cases. Child support cases are established either by Superior Court, by someone filing an action for paternity or for child support, whatever, legitimation, or either someone can go through the Office of Child Support Services and initiate a case there. It still has to go through the courts, but it's sort of two different pathways you can take. Either way, as a person paying child support, you need to file something in that case, whether it's
for that month.
For that, well, just in general,
saying I'm
facing hardship, I need a modification.
Okay.
And until that modification is had, you are still on the hook.
Right.
Child support doesn't just stop automatically because you have a hardship. You have to file, a document, a case, and let the court determine whether or not modifying it is appropriate.
Now, one of the things that I have probably been totally against is that, even if the court system say, hey, you pay X amount of dollars to this mother every month, right? And then you look, and I'll just use a number. I'll just throw a number out there. Let's say you got to pay $1,000 a month, right? So that $1,000 a month is going into someone else's, or it's going into that child's household name. I'll put it that way.
Right.
So it took away from my household.
Right.
Right. So I say to myself, you know what? I still got to live the way I'm living. I'm going to get a part-time job, or I'm going to get a little hustle or start a business or something. And that parent finds out that I got something else going. They can take me back to court and ask for more money. I mean, where does the line fall that I still got to take care of me? I understand you said I got to pay $1,000 a month, so I'm paying that $1,000. But I still got a lifestyle I got to maintain.
Right. And the courts can look at all of that when you're establishing child support. Like I said, when you go through the child support calculator and come up with a number based on someone's, and this is case by case, someone's situation and their other obligations. In some instances, people may have other children that they're supporting, that kind of thing that's not necessarily taken into account when you do the original or the first calculations. But that's why I said judges have some discretion to look at those other factors and kind of determine what's equitable, what's fair. Now, at the end of the day, you're looking at what's best for that child that's subject to that case. But all of that can be taken into consideration. Certainly someone can, if they find out you're making more money later, take you back and try to get a modification. But usually that's only supposed to happen when your income has significantly or substantially changed. Right. So if you just pick up another part-time job, I mean, that's probably not going to warrant someone getting a modification. But if you start making a ton more money, then yes, someone can say our financial circumstances have changed since the last time we, the court established child support, so now we need a modification. And it can be modified up or down.
So, and that's what I get into that, okay, let's use your analogy that I go and make a substantial amount of more money. And then this person, male or female, takes me back to court.
Right.
And I said, well, you know what? I created this, let me have custody of the child, and that person don't have to give me a dime. Why is that always a struggle? Because if it's about taking care of the child, I can physically, financially take care of this child without a shadow of a doubt. Right. Give her visitation or give him visitation, and let me take care of the child financially.
So, again, child support and custody are two different things. So if it's a case and it's just related to child support, that's all you can address. Now, if you want to make the decision to say, you know what, I want to have custody of my child, you have to file a whole different case, and you can try to get custody. But the judge is not going to only look at the financial piece. You understand custody, right. You're looking at who's been primarily taking care of this child for all these years, who is best equipped to handle their day-to-day care. What are each of your working schedules? Who can, really take on the task of being the primary parent? So it's not just the financial piece you're looking at. Even if you can fully support your child financially, the court's going to look at all other kind of factors when determining custody.
Why do you think they put it that way? They made the two separate. Why do you think that the system made the two separate? Because when you initially go in, it's one.
Sometimes. It depends on how the case started.
What? Okay.
So, because you can have like a divorce, for example, right? When you're going through a divorce and there are children involved, all of that is going to be taken care of as part of a divorce case. So the judge is going to decide, unless the parties agree, who's going to have custody and what child support is going to be. Like, all of that will be decided in that one case. But let's say you filed a legitimation case. You're a father and you want to establish legal rights to your child. It depends on how you file it. If you file it and you just want to get legal rights and nothing else, then that's all that'll be addressed, right? Legal rights and whatever child support should be. You have to actually ask for custody. In that case. Sometimes, again, for people that are not married, again, with the situation where you're legitimating a child, that's sort of where you see those disputes, happen, where they're fighting over custody and child support in one case, or a divorce. But it's really hard to separate them in those cases. But when you're talking about just going to file for child support, and that's all I'm asking for.
So you have to be very specific in what you're filing for.
Right, exactly.
So the other thing I want to ask is that here in the state of Georgia, we'll put it there, a child, let's say, like you say, a divorce or separation, at what age a child can say, I want to go with that parent? At what age?
So you're talking about a child filing an election. And in the state of Georgia, there's been actually a lot of back and forth in the legislature about this issue, because children as young as 11 really can file an election and express what their desire is in a case where custody is disputed. At the age of 14, their election is really kind of controlling. Not all the way, because a judge at the end of the day can still say it's not in your best interest, even though this is what you want to do. The judges have to consider the child's desires, but ultimately it's going to be the best interest. But children as young as 11 can file an election expressing where they want to be. And again, there's a lot of back and forth about it, because a lot of people think 11 is too young for a child to have to make that decision. And should children
be caught up in that?
Be caught up in it anyway.
What parent I'm going to decide.
Right, because this parent may just be more fun. They may let me get away with more. Right. Maybe they buy me more things. You don't know. Children that young sometimes make decisions based on things that are contrary to their best interest, but this is kind of what I like. I like this environment.
So here's the next question about age, because I hear so much debate about this. In the state of Georgia, when is a child considered an adult?
It depends on what we're talking about. And again, this is something that goes back and forth all the time. Now, to commit a crime, at what age can you be tried as an adult?
What age could you
17.
be? 17. So,
but guess what? In family court, you're a child until you turn 18.
Right. I mean, it's just like, and this might be getting a little off course. It's just like you hear people say, well, Atlanta's known for a bunch of strip clubs, and they're saying at 16, hey, I can sign this and go in a club and strip. So, it's that age thing they play with so much. Like
it is. It goes back and forth. Now, I don't know about this strip club connection. I didn't know children can sign up to work in this.
Well, that's club. That's 16. They say they consider them an adult.
But maybe if they have what's the word I'm looking for? There's a process where you can. What is it called when a minor is emancipated, basically? Yeah, emancipated. That's the word I'm looking for. Maybe in those cases, I guess, I don't know. But 17, you can be tried as an adult for criminal offenses. That I know. And I know that in family court, you're a child until you're 18. So I don't know why we have those differences. Again, that's a question for our legislators, because they make the laws.
Oh, okay. So let's look at Brother Mustafa's situation when he was talking about, how the legislation, this, that, and that. So should he go to his local congressperson and present his situation to them for them to fight for him?
If it's important enough to, I always tell people, whatever issues you're most concerned about and you want some kind of law change to address it, then yes, talk to your local legislators and even your federal legislators, if the issue is that important. So I know we're going back to the passport issue, and how can they keep my passport when I have my children, but I have this arrear? I mean, that's just the way the laws are written right now. If you think that's unfair and it's infringing upon your constitutional rights to be able to move and travel, then that's an issue you may want to discuss with the legislator to try to convince them, like, maybe we should reevaluate how this law is, because it's unfair.
Well, I didn't say unfair, because when I tried to with the whole situation on the personal side was how I was awarded the children, and I leaned forward to Judge, what about the arrears? She said, no.
Yeah, those arrears don't go away.
Because I understand, right, on the moral sense, right, is based upon that's the money that I owed, right, to take care of the children when they were with her. Whatever her actions was subsequently, before, during, after. I always say that before, during, after. Right? Where I'm at in life presently in my age and stage, I can, as a professional, I can write one commission check and that be done. You know, hey, come on, kids, we're going to ballot. All right, company paid trip. But my instance is the fact that with all the legal wrangling, I could never understand. Every time I went in the child support office and I had these legal questions, I really discovered I'm talking to people that this is clearly out of their scope. And when it was said to me, Mr. Mustafa, get a lawyer.
Now,
well, and that's probably the best advice, though, because a lot of times people who work in the child support office processing these cases, they're not lawyers.
Yes.
You know, so they don't necessarily understand all of the intricacies of the law and that. And so they're probably told, and they're right, they shouldn't be given legal advice. If you're not a lawyer with a license to practice law, don't give people legal advice. No. So that's always good advice. I always tell people to do that.
I was just so upset.
Let me say this:
how you get through all these loopholes? I mean, how does this? You know, what? The first question I initially asked was really a statement when Judge Leah Sears came into office. The first thing that she said that she was going to do was rectify family court in the state of Georgia because the prevalent phenomenon that is in the state of Georgia, a probate state, is the court system is over inundated. Even the criminal court, the superior court, is overwhelmed with family law cases. She said that was the first thing that she was going to address. And I went in especially down on Forsyth Street, downtown Atlanta. What's kind of amazing is that the U.S. Courthouse of Appeals is right around the corner from the child support office, right? And I had a buddy who was there, and this is when I seen first time I seen a lot of celebrities around it, around the area, and I would see the line wrapped around the building at child support court, and I'm like, okay, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense, right? You chose to have this child out of wedlock. But then when it doesn't go the way that you want it, you're able to go down there and file a child support case against whomever. It doesn't matter if he's the father or not, because once you put your name on that birth certificate, you are legally obligated to take care of that child. And when she said that, again, use the word subsequently, people that work in the court system, they are revealing statistics that a lot of those cases have come about where they are not the biological. A lot of fathers are not the biological.
But they signed the birth certificate.
And the only way they found out was at a deathbed confession of the custodial parent, the mother. Number two, when they went to go have a life-altering health experience. They needed to go get a blood transfusion or get a transplant or something to do with inheritance. Like, wanted to go get a life support. I mean, a life insurance policy, like what I do. And then, you had to, get all of this information. And then they found out that the child is not there. They said there's overwhelming cases, heartbreaking cases where they found out that the father is not the parent.
And that is heartbreaking for everybody, for the child particularly, right? And obviously for the father who has thought all these years that that's their biological child. I mean, I can't imagine. But again, I go back to the point of that's why we have DNA testing. And so if you have a child and you're not married, that would be the first thing I would do if I were
Well, we just learned today,
a father,
if you're not married, that
father.
child is naturally the mother's. You out of luck.
Yeah.
But now the thing about it, too, is, and I know, like we all said in the beginning, that different states have different child support laws.
Right.
Now, I'm going to address what you were saying about the arrears. Now, I know in Maryland, if the mother was collecting some kind of social service or something, it means that you owe the money to the state, not to the mother. Mm-hmm. And then if you're caught up in arrears, it's how much do you owe the state? How much money does she give to the state? And if you satisfy the state, then the mother can sit back and say, you know what, I don't want the rest of the money. She can, tell you, I don't want the arrears. I don't want the arrears.
What do those states have in common? Right? Number one is Maryland. I don't know about Maryland. I'm going back to my city. I'm still old enough to remember things that they don't teach in school. But Maryland, Kentucky, and Virginia, those are Commonwealth states, right? So, like New Jersey. New Jersey was the last state in the Union, if not the North, because they benefited off slavery. New Jersey was the last state to abolish slavery. And that's why it makes sense when you look it up in the lexicon. New Jersey is a freeholder state. So establishing paternity and custody and ownership within these states, the laws are different from Arizona, Wyoming, and Kentucky. Because lastly, some of these places, the mother, I won't say the mother, just to keep it non-gender, they can ask for back child support. There's no back child support in Georgia. There's arrears, but say like the child reaches 18, and I've seen, like in my own family, they threaten to take the parent. I'm going to take the parent back to court to get the back child support. Right? I've seen even here, famous rapper and celebrity 50 Cent's the mother of his child and his son. They live. I remember seeing them up the street. He's still going back and forth online in the internet, trying to charge that his father owes him back child support. Yeah. You know, so that doesn't exist here in Georgia, but I know legally some places you can go get back child support.
Yeah, that's true. Child support is not retroactive in Georgia, so you can't wait until a child is 16 and start collecting support and then say, well, I want child support from back when the child was a baby. But if there was never a court order, you can't do that.
Well, that makes sense, because then if you say, okay, if I want back child support, and then come to find out that you've been paying for the child, and then find out that child is not yours, somebody's going to get a back, and it's not going to be child support. So they're going to get backhand, forehand, up hand.
Well,
somebody will get slapped.
We want to wrap this program up.
We can probably talk about child support
all day, all long. Hey, and the key word is wrap it up. You know what I mean? The key word is wrap it up.
I like it.
So
if you want to avoid these child support problems, just wrap it up.
And then you won't have to set in front of a judge to have these discussions. But we've learned a lot here, and we appreciate you coming in and sharing this with us today. Because I've learned a lot about how the state of Georgia operates. So I would tell all these single people that's running around here, and you get some female pregnant, you are no longer the daddy, but you will be paying.
You'll be paying if you're on the birth certificate.
But she has, that automatically gives her custody.
Yep. Yep.
So like I said, the key thing is here is wrap it up, and we would just want to welcome, thank Judge Matthews for coming in and sharing the information. You heard it right from the professional. Mm-hmm. So
look, I always tell people I don't make the laws now, but I have to follow them. It's my job to enforce them and follow them. So if y'all want some changes, talk to your legislators. But thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I hope you all learned something.
So, we want you all to keep continuing listening to us on peoplethinkaboutit.com. You can email us at peoplethinkaboutit@gmail.com. You can comment on the show. We release new episodes every Wednesday at 8 p.m. So you'll be able to hear the new episodes on Wednesdays at 8 p.m. We also have a peoplethinkaboutit.com you can go to. You can donate, to help keep the show going and things like that. A $25 donation or more will get you a People Think About It t-shirt. And also, if you want to hear talk about a certain subject or something, you can go to our peoplethinkaboutit.com. It'll take you to our pod page, and you can register, and we can maybe talk about what you want to hear about. But once again, we want to thank Judge Regina Matthews for coming in and being our special guest today.
Thanks,
we really appreciate it. We really appreciate the information because, information is the key to life.
And look, I have to do a quick plug if I can.
Go ahead. Okay.
So I serve in the magistrate court. I think you all said that earlier, but I am running currently to be on the Superior Court. So I'll be on the ballot in 2024. So you can go to my website at www.judgematthews.com, and you can learn about my candidacy, what my skill sets are, and hopefully I can get your vote in 2024.
And we will be out there, and that's a good thing to end this show on as well. We encourage everybody, not everybody, to get out and vote.
Absolutely.
You know, to me, I say this: if you don't get out and vote, then you have no say-so in anything, whether it's child support, whether it's whatever the legal system is putting you through. If you don't vote, you have no say-so.
That's right.
So
Use
get
your
out
voice.
and vote. Get out and vote, and look for Judge Regina Matthew. Go to her website and give him your website again.
It's judgematthews.com.
JudgeMatthews.com. So we want to thank you guys for listening to People Think About It. Y'all keep it going, and we'll see you next Wednesday.